My name is Alicia Bennett, and I am 28 years old. On what should have been the happiest day of my life, my parents abandoned me for a trip to Hawaii, leaving behind a box that shattered my world. Inside was my wedding dress burned beyond recognition with a note saying, "Let us see how you get married now." What they never expected was that my in-laws would step in and transform my tragedy into triumph. Before I continue this story, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal. Growing up with Richard and Diane Bennett was like walking on eggshells every single day of my life. From the moment I could make my own decisions, they controlled everything about me. What I wore, who I befriended, which activities I participated in, even how I styled my hair. Nothing was ever good enough for them. We lived in a beautiful colonial-style house in an upper-middle-class neighborhood in Connecticut. Dad was a bank manager and Mom worked as a real estate agent. We were comfortable financially, but my parents were obsessed with appearances. Everything had to look perfect from the outside, regardless of how miserable we might be behind closed doors. "Alicia, stand up straight. People are watching," my mother would hiss through her perfect smile at social events. "Alicia, that outfit makes you look cheap. Go change immediately," my father would say before dinner parties. When it came time for college, I dreamed of studying art at a school in California. I had been secretly preparing my portfolio for months, working late into the night when my parents thought I was sleeping. Art. What kind of future is that? My father scoffed when I finally gathered the courage to tell them. "You will study business at my alma mater." End of discussion. My scholarship acceptance letter to the art program arrived while I was at school. When I came home excited to share the news, I found my mother in the kitchen, the shredded remains of the envelope in the trash. "We already sent in your deposit to State University," she said, without looking up from her magazine. "You will thank us later when you have a real career." After graduation, I took a marketing job that they approved of, but secretly enrolled in night classes for graphic design. It was during one of these classes that I met Jason Turner. He was guest lecturing about branding in the luxury market, and something about his confidence and genuine enthusiasm sparked something in me. After class, I approached him with questions, and we ended up talking until the janitor kicked us out. He asked for my number, and despite hearing my mother's voice in my head warning against being too forward, I gave it to him. When Jason called and asked me to dinner, I accepted without telling my parents who he was or what he did. They would have researched him immediately, finding fault, regardless of his credentials. For the first time, I wanted something that was just mine, untainted by their criticism. Our first date was magical. Jason was different from anyone I had ever met. He listened, really listened when I spoke about my dreams. He asked thoughtful questions and shared his own journey of finding his passion in the jewelry business, working for his family company. "You have such an eye for design," he told me after I showed him some of my sketches. "Have you ever thought about designing jewelry?" No one had ever encouraged my creative side before. With Jason, I felt seen and valued. Over the next 6 months, our relationship blossomed, and I began to discover parts of myself that had been suppressed by years under my parents' thumb. "You seem different lately," my mother noted suspiciously over Sunday dinner 3 months into my relationship with Jason. "Who is this boy you are seeing?" "His name is Jason. He works in marketing for a jewelry company," I said, purposely vague. "Jewelry sounds unstable. Is it one of those mall kiosks?" my father asked with a dismissive wave. "No, it is an established company," I replied, biting my tongue to keep from defending Jason further. I knew anything I said would be used against him. 8 months into our relationship, Jason proposed during a picnic in the botanical gardens. He had arranged for a string quartet to play my favorite song, and the ring he offered was unlike anything I had ever seen. A stunning diamond, surrounded by intricate metalwork that he had designed himself. "I wanted something as unique as you are," he whispered as he slid it onto my finger. When I called my parents with the news, the line went silent for several seconds. "Well, I suppose we should meet him before you make any hasty decisions," my mother finally said, her voice chilly. The dinner where Jason met my parents was excruciating. They questioned him like he was on trial, nitpicking everything from his career choice to his education. Jason remained polite and engaged, but I could see the concern in his eyes as he witnessed firsthand how they treated me. In contrast, meeting Jason's parents, George and Eleanor Turner, was like stepping into a warm bath after being out in the cold. They welcomed me with genuine hugs and excitement, their home filled with laughter and easy conversation. "We have heard so much about you," Alicia Eleanor said, squeezing my hands warmly. "Jason says you have an incredible eye for design." "Our son has never been happier," George added, clapping Jason on the shoulder affectionately. Over dinner, they asked about my interests and dreams, listening attentively to my answers without judgment. When I mentioned my graphic design classes, Eleanor's eyes lit up. "You must see our new branding campaign. We have been looking for fresh perspectives," she said enthusiastically. It was only at the end of the evening that I realized they had not once mentioned their wealth or status. Jason had told me his family owned a jewelry business, but he had been humble about the details. It was their warmth and acceptance that impressed me, not their success. As wedding planning began, the stark contrast between our families became even more apparent. Every decision became a battleground with my parents. "A spring wedding. Everyone does spring. You should wait for fall," my mother insisted. "That venue is too modern." "What is wrong with the country club where your cousin Sarah got married?" my father demanded. Every suggestion was met with criticism, every choice second-guessed. They complained about the cost while simultaneously pushing for more expensive options that matched their vision, not mine. "I just want you to have the perfect day," my mother would say after reducing me to tears over centerpiece choices. "You will understand when you have children." But I was beginning to understand something else. This pattern of control would never end unless I put a stop to it. The 8 months of wedding planning became a psychological warfare campaign. Every decision turned into a power struggle with my parents, undermining my confidence at every turn. The venue was the first major battle. "This converted warehouse space is absolutely unsuitable," my mother declared. After our tour of the rustic chic location Jason and I had fallen in love with. "What will people think? Your father and I would be embarrassed to host our friends there." "It is our wedding, Mom," I countered, my voice shaking slightly. "We love the exposed brick and the way the sunlight comes through those big windows." "Well, if you want to get married in what looks like an abandoned factory, that is your choice," she sniffed. "But do not expect us to contribute financially to such a poor decision." The guest list became another contentious issue. My parents insisted on inviting dozens of their business associates and distant relatives I barely knew, while questioning every friend I wanted to include. "Jennifer from your art class. What does her father do again? Is she really important enough to make the cut?" my mother asked while reviewing my list. "She is my friend, Mom. That makes her important to me," I replied, growing increasingly frustrated. My mother constantly compared my choices to my cousin's weddings, particularly Sarah's, which had been featured in a local society magazine. Sarah's dress was custom-made by that wonderful designer from New York. Her flowers were flown in from Holland. "Everyone still talks about how elegant everything was," she would remind me repeatedly. Jason noticed how these planning sessions affected me, how I would come home deflated and questioning myself. He grew increasingly concerned about my emotional state. "Alicia, this is our day," he reminded me gently, after a particularly rough meeting with my parents. "We do not need to please anyone but ourselves." It was during this time that I began to learn more about Jason's family business. I knew they owned a jewelry company, but I had not realized the scope of their success. Golden Legacy was not just any jewelry business, but a globally recognized brand with boutiques in major cities worldwide. The Turner family had built their reputation on exceptional craftsmanship and innovative designs spanning 3 generations. Despite their success, George and Eleanor lived relatively modestly. Their home was beautiful but not ostentatious. They drove nice cars but not flashy ones. They valued quality and craftsmanship over showing off their wealth. When they sensed the growing tension with my parents over wedding costs, they quietly offered to help. "We would be honored to contribute," George said during dinner one evening. "Consider it our gift to you both." "No strings attached," Eleanor added, seeming to understand my hesitation based on my experiences with my parents. "This is your wedding. We just want to support whatever vision you have." Their generosity came without the controlling strings my parents attached to everything, which only highlighted the toxic nature of my relationship with Richard and Diane. The dress shopping experience became the perfect example of this contrast. My mother insisted on accompanying me to select a wedding gown, an outing I had simultaneously looked forward to and dreaded. Nothing too revealing, she instructed the consultant at the high-end boutique she had chosen, and nothing too fashion-forward. Alicia needs something classic to balance her figure flaws. I tried on dress after dress, each one meeting with my mother's disapproval. Too poofy, too simple, makes your arms look big. That neckline is inappropriate for a church. After 4 hours and 2 boutiques, I was exhausted and on the verge of tears. Nothing had earned even reluctant approval from my mother. The following weekend, I went shopping again, but this time with Jason's sister Kate and my best friend Laura. The experience could not have been more different. "You will know when it is right," Kate encouraged. "Just listen to your own heart." In the third store I found it, a stunning Align gown with delicate lace and subtle beading that made me feel beautiful and truly myself. When I stepped out of the dressing room, Kate and Laura both teared up. "That is the one," Laura whispered. "You look absolutely radiant." I purchased the dress that day without my mother's input or approval. When I told my parents I had found my gown, my mother was furious. "You went without me." After I cleared my schedule for more shopping next week, "This is just inconsiderate, Alicia. I am your mother. I should have been there." "I found something I love," I told her, trying to stay firm. "I think you will like it too when you see it." "Well, I certainly hope it is appropriate," she sniffed. "Remember, this wedding reflects on our entire family." As the wedding date approached, tensions escalated further. My parents threatened not to attend unless certain changes were made to the ceremony and reception. "We refuse to be seated at the same table as Jason's uncle, with the tattoos," my father declared. "And that band you have chosen is completely unsuitable. People our age will find their music offensive." The final argument happened just 1 week before the wedding. My parents arrived at our apartment unannounced, armed with a list of non-negotiable changes they insisted needed to be implemented. "We have spoken to the caterer," my mother announced. "We have upgraded the menu to include the salmon option that Sarah had at her wedding." "You went behind my back to change our wedding menu?" I asked, stunned by their audacity. "We are paying for part of this wedding," my father reminded me. "That gives us certain rights." "Actually," Jason interjected calmly, "we returned your check last month, remember? After you said it was contingent on changing the venue." My parents looked momentarily flustered before my mother recovered. "Regardless, as your parents, we have a say in how this event unfolds. The current plan is simply embarrassing." Something in me finally snapped. Years of suppressing my own desires, of shrinking myself to fit into their narrow expectations, culminated in this moment. "No," I said firmly. "This is our wedding. We have made our decisions. You are welcome to attend as our guests and share in our happiness, but you do not get to control this day." My parents looked at me as if I had slapped them. My mother's face hardened into a mask of disapproval I knew all too well. "You will regret this attitude, Alicia," she said coldly. "You always make poor choices when left to your own devices. But go ahead. Make your mistake. Just do not come crying to us when everything falls apart." They left in a huff, my father warning that they would think about whether they would even attend. But for the first time in my life, I stood my ground. I had chosen love over fear, authenticity over appearances. Whatever happened next, I knew I had made the right choice for myself and my future with Jason. The morning of my wedding day dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring Saturday that seemed to promise new beginnings. I woke early, my stomach fluttering with a mixture of excitement and lingering anxiety about my parents. Despite our argument, I had left them a heartfelt voicemail the night before telling them how much it would mean to have them there. "They will come," Laura assured me, as she arrived at the hotel suite we had booked for wedding preparations. No parent would miss their daughter's wedding. My other bridesmaids arrived shortly after, bringing coffee, pastries, and high spirits. The hairstylist and makeup artist set up their stations, and the room buzzed with excited chatter and laughter. For a little while, I allowed myself to relax into the joy of the moment. Then my phone chimed with a text message. My heart jumped, hoping it was my mother telling me they were on their way. Instead, the message sent a chill through me. "You will regret this day. We tried to save you from yourself." "Is everything okay?" Kate asked, noticing my expression. Just my mom being dramatic, I said, trying to sound unconcerned. I am sure they will be here soon. But as the morning progressed, my calls to both parents went straight to voicemail. By 11 o'clock, with just 3 hours until the ceremony, a knot of dread had formed in my stomach. Has anyone heard from my parents? I asked the room, trying to keep my voice steady. No one had. Kate suggested calling their neighbors, who confirmed what I was beginning to suspect. My parents had left early that morning with suitcases, apparently for a trip. On my wedding day, they actually left town, I whispered, struggling to comprehend the level of cruelty this represented. Before I could process this betrayal, there was a knock at the door. A courier stood there holding a large white box. Delivery for Alicia Bennett, he announced cheerfully. That must be the flowers for your hair, Laura said, taking the box and thanking the courier. But when she placed it on the bed next to me, I knew instantly it was not from the florist. The handwriting on the card attached was unmistakably my mother's perfect script. My hands trembled as I opened the card. Inside, in her elegant penmanship, were the words, "Let us see how you get married now." The room fell silent as I slowly lifted the lid of the box. Inside, folded with eerie precision, was my wedding dress, or rather what remained of it. The beautiful lace had been burned and cut in strategic places, leaving gaping holes throughout the delicate fabric. The beadwork had been ripped off, leaving jagged threads where the intricate patterns had once been. The veil was shredded into ribbons. "Oh my God!" Kate gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I could not speak, could not move. The room spun around me as I stared at the destroyed gown, the physical manifestation of my parents' rejection and cruelty. This was not just disapproval or control. This was calculated malice designed to cause maximum pain on what should have been the happiest day of my life. I cannot believe they would do this, Laura whispered, putting her arm around my shoulders. A sob escaped me, then breaking the dam of shock. I collapsed onto the floor, the ruined dress clutched in my hands, my body shaking with the force of my grief. This was beyond anything I had imagined possible, even from them. "Call Jason," I heard Kate say urgently to someone. "I know it is bad luck, but this is an emergency." "No," I protested weakly through my tears. "Do not ruin his day too." But Kate was already dialing, stepping into the hallway to explain the situation. Minutes later, there was another knock at the door, more forceful this time. Jason stood there, still in jeans and a t-shirt, his face tight with concern and anger. Behind him were his parents, George and Eleanor, both looking equally worried. "Alicia," Jason said, kneeling beside me on the floor, taking in the destroyed dress and my tear-streaked face. Kate told us what happened. I could not look at him, shame and humiliation washing over me in waves. "They left for Hawaii," I choked out. "They planned this. They wanted to ruin everything." "May I?" Eleanor asked gently, indicating the box. I nodded numbly as she carefully examined the damaged dress. Jason held me while I cried, his own anger visible in the tight set of his jaw, but his touch remained gentle. "We can postpone," he offered. "We can do this another day when you have had time to recover from this." Part of me wanted to agree to curl up and hide from the world. But another part, a stronger part that had been slowly awakening throughout my relationship with Jason, refused to give my parents that victory. "No," I said, wiping my tears. "I will not let them win. I will not let them ruin this day for us. But I do not know how to fix this. The ceremony is in 3 hours, and I have no dress." "Actually," Eleanor said thoughtfully, her phone already in hand, "I think I might know someone who can help." Eleanor Turner was not just the mother of the groom or the co-owner of a successful jewelry business. As I would soon discover, she was also a woman with connections throughout the fashion and luxury goods world. Within minutes of seeing my destroyed wedding dress, she was on the phone making calls with the focused efficiency of someone used to solving complex problems. "Sophia, it is Eleanor Turner. We have an emergency situation. How quickly can you get to the Four Seasons downtown?" She listened for a moment, then continued. "Wonderful. Bring your team and every sample in your current bridal collection, sizes 4 through 8. Yes, it is exactly what you are thinking. A wedding rescue." While Eleanor worked the phones, George sat beside me on the couch, his kind eyes filled with compassion. "When Eleanor and I got married," he said, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder, "her family was against it. They thought I was not good enough for their daughter because I was just starting out in the business. They refused to come to the wedding. I looked up surprised by this revelation. It nearly broke her heart, George continued. But we decided to get married anyway, surrounded by friends who truly supported us. That was 40 years ago, and I can tell you this. With certainty, family is not always about blood. Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we are born into. His words were like a balm to my wounded heart. For the first time since discovering my parents' betrayal, I felt a glimmer of hope. Jason had stepped out to make some calls of his own, and when he returned, his expression was more settled, determined. The photographer and videographer are handling the delay. The venue is fine with pushing back the ceremony by 2 hours. Everyone understands and wants to help, he reported. Within 30 minutes of Eleanor's call, the hotel suite was transformed into what resembled a high-end bridal salon. Sofia Martinez, apparently a renowned bridal designer and old friend of the Turners, arrived with 3 assistants and racks of white gowns. "So you are the bride who needs a miracle," Sofia said, briskly eyeing me with professional assessment rather than pity, which I appreciated. "Stand up, let me look at you." As Sofia and her team began the process of finding me a new dress, Kate approached with another surprise. "I brought this just in case," she said, unveiling a garment bag. Inside was her own backup wedding dress purchased during her engagement 2 years earlier before she had found her actual wedding gown. "It might need alterations, but it is another option." The next 2 hours were a blur of activity. Women I had known for years, and women I had just met that day, rallied around me in an extraordinary display of solidarity. The makeup artist redid my tear-streaked makeup. The hairstylist adjusted my hairstyle to complement whichever dress would be chosen. Laura ran interference with guests, keeping them updated while shielding me from having to explain the situation repeatedly. Sofia's collection offered several beautiful options, but it was a gown from her upcoming season not yet released to stores that made everyone in the room gasp when I tried it on. The fitted bodice with delicate beading flowed into a skirt that seemed to float around me, the fabric catching the light with each movement. It was different from my original dress, but somehow felt even more right. "This is the one," I whispered, looking at my reflection in wonder. "A few quick alterations, and it will be perfect," Sofia declared, already pinning the hem. As her team worked with remarkable speed and skill, I turned to Eleanor, overwhelmed by her kindness. "I do not know how to thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You have saved my wedding day." "No thanks necessary," she replied, squeezing my hand. "This is what family does for each other. And make no mistake, Alicia, you are family now." With the dress crisis miraculously resolved, another question loomed in my mind. I had always imagined my father walking me down the aisle despite our complicated relationship. Now that dream, like my original wedding dress, was in ashes. As if reading my thoughts, George approached me while the final touches were being added to my new gown. "Alicia," he said gently, "I would be honored to walk you down the aisle today if you would allow me that privilege. But only if it feels right to you." Tears filled my eyes again, but this time they were tears of gratitude rather than grief. I would love that I managed to say, "Thank you." By the time we arrived at the venue, the ceremony had been delayed by just under 2 hours, but not a single guest had left. If anything, the atmosphere seemed charged with a special kind of anticipation as whispers of what had happened spread through the gathering. Standing at the back of the venue, my arm linked with George's, I took a deep breath. The string quartet began playing the processional music, and the doors opened to reveal an aisle strewn with rose petals and lined with smiling faces. At the end stood Jason, his eyes finding mine immediately, his expression a mixture of love, pride, and something else that looked like awe. "Ready?" George asked softly. I nodded, suddenly sure, more than ever. Our walk down the aisle felt symbolic in ways I had not anticipated. With each step, I was moving not just toward Jason and our future together, but away from the toxic patterns of my past. George's steady presence beside me represented the kind of supportive love I was choosing to surround myself with from this day forward. When we reached the altar, George placed my hand in Jason's with a gentle squeeze before stepping back. The officiant smiled warmly at us before beginning the ceremony. Jason and I had written our own vows, but in the emotion of the moment, I added words I had not planned. "Jason, today has shown me even more clearly what I already knew, that your love is a safe harbor in life's storms. You and your family have taught me what unconditional support truly means. I promise to bring that same steadfast love to our marriage, to stand by you through whatever challenges we face, and to create with you the kind of family built on respect, understanding, and joy." Jason's eyes shone with unshed tears as he squeezed my hands and delivered his own heartfelt promises. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the cheers and applause that erupted seemed to wash away the last of the morning's pain. The reception that followed was more joyful than I could have imagined possible after such a traumatic start to the day. The cocktail hour flowed into dinner seamlessly, the band kept the dance floor packed, and everywhere I looked I saw genuine happiness for us. During the toasts, Eleanor stood and raised her glass, her elegant demeanor commanding immediate attention. To Alicia and Jason, she said, her voice clear and strong, "Today has proven what we already knew, that you two can weather any storm together. Alicia, you have shown remarkable grace and resilience today. We are so proud to officially welcome you to our family, though in our hearts, you have been a daughter to us from the moment Jason brought you home." When it came time for the traditional father-daughter dance, I felt a momentary pang of sadness. But George stepped forward without hesitation, leading me onto the dance floor with a respectful bow that made me smile despite myself. "You know," he said as we danced, "when Jason first told us about you, he said you were not just beautiful and talented, but one of the strongest people he had ever met. I did not fully understand what he meant until today. The way you have handled this situation shows extraordinary character." Later in the evening, during a quiet moment while Jason was speaking with some guests, I found myself standing with Sophia, the designer who had saved the day. "Your dress is absolutely stunning," I told her gratefully. "I cannot believe you created this miracle in just a few hours." "The dress is just fabric," she replied with a warm smile. "The real beauty is in how you wore it today with such courage and dignity. Besides," she added with a wink, "I have wanted to work with the Turners for years. Their jewelry designs would pair perfectly with my dresses." It was then that I began to fully comprehend the scope of my new family's influence and connections. Throughout the evening, I gathered bits and pieces of information that painted a clearer picture. Golden Legacy was not just any jewelry company, but one of the most prestigious luxury brands in the world. The elegant pieces that Eleanor and Kate wore so casually represented extraordinary craftsmanship and value. The guests from their side included notable figures from the fashion and business worlds who treated the Turner family with obvious respect. Yet none of this wealth or status had been flaunted or even mentioned. Unlike my parents, who had constantly strived to appear more successful and connected than they were, the Turners wore their actual success, lightly valuing character and kindness above social standing. When Jason and I finally left the reception amid a shower of rose petals, my heart was full to bursting with gratitude and love. In the privacy of our hotel suite, I finally allowed myself to fully process the remarkable turn the day had taken. "I still cannot believe we made it through this," I said as Jason helped unpin my borrowed veil. "This morning I thought everything was ruined." "Nothing could ruin today," Jason said gently, turning me to face him. "As long as we ended up married, it was always going to be perfect." As we talked into the early hours of the morning, I shared with Jason my growing realization about his family's prominence in the jewelry world. He looked slightly embarrassed. "I should have been more clear about the family business," he admitted. "But when we first met, it was so refreshing to be with someone who did not know or care about Golden Legacy. You liked me for me, not for my family name or connections." "I still like you just for you," I assured him with a kiss. "The rest is just interesting context." That night, falling asleep in my new husband's arms, I felt a sense of peace I had rarely known. The day had brought both the greatest betrayal and the greatest blessing of my life. Somehow, through the crucible of that experience, I had emerged stronger, more certain of my path forward, and surrounded by love that asked nothing in return except that I be authentically myself. Our honeymoon in Europe was exactly what I needed after the emotional roller coaster of the wedding. Jason had arranged for us to stay in luxury boutique hotels in Paris, Venice, and the Greek islands, a 2-week escape that felt like stepping into another world. My parents wanted to upgrade us to the presidential suite, Jason admitted as we checked into our first hotel, a historic property overlooking the Seine. I told them we would prefer something more private and intimate. I appreciated his sensitivity. While the Turner family's generosity was boundless, Jason understood my need to process everything that had happened without feeling overwhelmed by their resources. The peaceful days wandering through Parisian streets, cruising the Venetian canals, and lounging on Mediterranean beaches gave me space to heal. Each morning I woke up beside Jason, feeling a little lighter, a little more myself. "You seem different," Jason observed one evening, as we shared a bottle of wine on our private terrace in Santorini. "More relaxed, more confident." "I feel different," I admitted, like I have finally stepped out from under a shadow I did not even realize was there. We barely checked our phones during the trip, choosing instead to be fully present with each other. It was only on our last day, as we prepared to return home, that I decided to post some wedding photos on social media. "Are you sure?" Jason asked gently. "You do not have to share anything if you are not ready." But I was ready. I carefully selected images that captured the joy and beauty of the day, including one of me in Sophia's stunning gown, another of George walking me down the aisle, and several of Jason and me during the ceremony and reception. I made sure to tag Sophia Martinez Designs and Golden Legacy Jewelry, giving credit to the people who had saved our day. My caption was simple: "Sometimes the family we choose is the greatest blessing of all." Thank you to everyone who made our wedding day perfect, especially the incredible Sophia Martinez for the dream dress and George and Eleanor Turner for showing me what unconditional love truly means. We boarded our flight home shortly after I posted, and I thought little more about it during the 10-hour journey. It was only when we landed and turned our phones back on that I realized something unexpected had happened. My post had gone viral overnight. There were thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, and dozens of shares. My follower count had exploded, and my inbox was flooded with messages. "What in the world?" I murmured, scrolling through the notifications in disbelief. Several fashion magazines had picked up the story of the emergency wedding dress, praising both Sophia's design and my resilience. Business publications had highlighted the Golden Legacy heir's wedding and the fortuitous fashion industry connection that saved the day. Lifestyle blogs were calling it the wedding save of the century. But most shocking of all was the notification that showed 99 missed calls on my phone. Dozens were from my parents. The rest were from relatives, old classmates, and acquaintances I had not heard from in years. As we waited for our luggage, I listened to some of the voicemails. The first few from my mother were demanding and cold. "Alicia, call us immediately. What kind of lies have you been telling people?" By the 10th message, her tone had shifted to threatening. "If you do not take down that post, your father and I will have no choice but to tell everyone the truth about your behavior." The later messages became increasingly desperate. "Alicia, please. You are embarrassing us. People are asking questions we cannot answer." The final message, left just an hour before our plane landed, was almost pleading. "Call us when you get this. We need to talk. Things have gotten out of hand." The text messages followed a similar pattern, beginning with anger and accusations before evolving into damage control attempts. "How dare you set us up to look bad publicly," read one early text from my father. "You never told us Jason was that Turner family. You deliberately hid this from us," accused another. "People from the country club are asking why we were not at the wedding. What are we supposed to tell them?" my mother had written. The most recent text was the most revealing. "We expect you to issue a public correction immediately. Your post makes it look like we abandoned you, which is outrageous and unfair." I showed the messages to Jason, who read them with a deepening frown. "They are trying to rewrite history," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "After what they did to you, to us, they still cannot take responsibility." As we drove home from the airport, more details emerged through texts from friends and family. Apparently, my parents had cut their Hawaii trip short after seeing my post and the subsequent media attention. They had been telling people there was a misunderstanding and that they had been unfairly portrayed in the situation. "The audacity is almost impressive," I remarked to Jason, a new sense of clarity washing over me. "They actually believe they are the victims here." We had been home less than 24 hours when my Aunt Patricia, my mother's younger sister, and the only relative I had always felt truly comfortable with, called to check on me. "I want you to know not everyone in the family is buying their version of events," she said after confirming I was okay. "Your cousin Taylor saw the burned dress before they left for Hawaii. She overheard them planning it." "They showed the dress to Taylor?" I asked, stunned by this new level of cruelty. "Not intentionally. She stopped by to drop off a wedding gift for you and saw your mother packing it into that box. When she asked what was happening, your mother just said they were teaching you a lesson about respect. The confirmation that the act had been premeditated and witnessed made me feel physically ill. This was not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a calculated attempt to cause maximum pain. "Thank you for telling me," I said to Aunt Patricia. "I needed to know the truth." "For what it is worth," she added before hanging up, "your wedding looked beautiful in the photos, and you looked happier than I have ever seen you." That evening, as Jason and I were unpacking and settling back into our apartment, my phone rang again. It was my mother. After a moment's hesitation, I declined the call. "You do not have to speak to them right now," Jason said supportively. "Or ever, if that is what you decide." "I know," I replied, feeling strangely calm. "But eventually I think I will need to face them on my terms. Not for their sake, but for my own closure." For the first time in my life, I felt truly in control of my relationship with my parents. Their approval, their acceptance, their love, all things I had desperately craved for as long as I could remember, suddenly seemed less important than my own self-respect and the healthy, supportive love I had found with Jason and his family. I turned off my phone that night and slept more peacefully than I had in years, nestled in the certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. After careful consideration and several sessions with a therapist I had started seeing to process the wedding trauma, I decided to meet with my parents. This was not about reconciliation, but about standing my ground and speaking my truth in a way I never had before. I suggested a neutral location, a quiet restaurant, with private dining rooms, where we would have privacy without being in either of our territories. Jason insisted on accompanying me, not to speak for me, but to support me through what would inevitably be a difficult encounter. "I will follow your lead," he promised as we drove to the meeting. "This is your conversation to have." My parents arrived precisely on time, looking impeccably put together as always, though I noticed new lines of tension around my mother's mouth and dark circles under my father's eyes, partially concealed by expensive concealer. "Alicia," my mother said stiffly as they sat down across from us, "you are looking well." No hugs, no warmth, not even a pretense of affection, just assessment and judgment as always. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," I replied, my voice steady, despite the anxiety churning in my stomach. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table until my father cleared his throat. "I assume you know why we needed to speak with you," he began, his tone clipped and businesslike. "Your social media post has created quite a situation for us. People are asking questions, making assumptions." "What exactly did you expect would happen?" I asked, genuinely curious about their thought process. "You burned my wedding dress, left a cruel note, and abandoned me on my wedding day. Did you think I would keep that a secret forever?" "You are exaggerating what happened," my mother said dismissively. "We simply chose not to attend a wedding we did not approve of. The dress was an unfortunate impulse." "An unfortunate impulse," I repeated incredulously. "You deliberately destroyed my wedding dress and left it for me to find hours before my ceremony with a note saying, 'Let us see how you get married now.' How is that an impulse?" "We were upset," my father interjected. "You had been disrespectful and dismissive of our input throughout the entire planning process." "Input? You tried to control every single aspect of my wedding. When I stood up for myself, you punished me in the cruelest way you could imagine." My mother's lips thinned into a hard line. "What is truly cruel is how you have humiliated us publicly. Do you have any idea what we have been dealing with? Our friends, our colleagues, everyone has seen those posts about your in-laws saving the day. You have made us look like monsters. You made yourselves look like monsters by behaving like monsters." I replied, my voice quiet but firm. "I simply told the truth." "The truth?" my father scoffed. "The truth is that you deliberately hid the fact that you were marrying into one of the wealthiest families in the country. Why did you never tell us who the Turners really were?" And there it was, the real source of their anger, not that I had exposed their cruelty, but that they had missed an opportunity to associate themselves with wealth and status. "I did tell you they owned a jewelry business," I pointed out. "But their wealth was irrelevant to why I was marrying Jason." "Irrelevant?" My mother looked genuinely bewildered. "Alicia, nothing about this is irrelevant. If we had known who they were, we would have." She trailed off, perhaps realizing how revealing her statement was about to become. "You would have what Mom treated them differently. treated me differently, been at the wedding with bells on, ready to network and make connections. Both my parents had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable, confirming my suspicions. "We burned the dress to teach you a lesson," my mother finally admitted, her voice hard. "We expected you would have to cancel the wedding, or at least postpone it. We thought it would give you time to reconsider your attitude toward us." "You wanted to cancel my wedding because I would not let you control it." I clarified, the full weight of their intentions sinking in. "You were willing to break my heart to maintain your control over me." "We have always wanted what is best for you," my father insisted. "Everything we have ever done has been to help you avoid mistakes." "No," I shook my head. "Everything you have ever done has been to ensure I lived the life you wanted for me, not the one I wanted for myself." Jason had remained silent beside me, his hand occasionally squeezing mine in support. Now my father turned his attention to him. "And you," he said accusingly. "Why did you never properly introduce yourself, never mention your family's company or position? Was this some kind of test?" "It was not a test," Mr. Bennett Jason replied calmly. "My family's business is important to us, but it does not define who we are as people. I wanted Alicia to know me, not my family name or net worth." "Convenient," my mother muttered. The conversation continued in this vein, with my parents alternating between defending their actions, minimizing the harm they had caused, and expressing outrage at being portrayed negatively. Not once did they offer a genuine apology or show remorse for the pain they had inflicted. As we spoke, another shocking revelation emerged. This was not the first time they had sabotaged my relationships. "That scholarship to the art program in California," my father said dismissively when I mentioned past controlling behaviors. "The boy who wrote the recommendation letter was clearly interested in you. We were protecting you from making a mistake." "Brian was my art teacher," I said, stunned by this new information. "He was married with children." "And that internship in New York you were so upset about losing," my mother added. "The program director called to confirm some details, and we simply expressed our concerns about the environment being unsuitable for you." Piece by piece, I began to understand how thoroughly they had manipulated my life from behind the scenes, closing doors I had not even known were open to me, all in the name of keeping me dependent on them and their approval. "Why?" I finally asked, my voice breaking slightly. "Why could you never just let me be myself?" "Because we know better than you do what you need," my mother said, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "We have always been afraid of what would happen if you were left to make your own choices." "And look what happened," my father added bitterly. "The first major decision you make against our wishes and you end up with." He gestured vaguely at Jason. "With what I prompted. With a kind, supportive husband who respects me. With in-laws who helped me when you abandoned me. With happiness and independence." My mother leaned forward, her expression deadly serious. "Alicia, you need to make a choice here. Either you publicly correct the impression you have given about us, or we will have to consider whether we can continue to have a relationship with you." An ultimatum. Of course it would come to this, their final attempt to regain control. I took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm in the face of what would once have terrified me. "I will not lie to protect your reputation," I said clearly. "What happened happened. I have not exaggerated or misrepresented anything. If having a relationship with you requires me to deny my own reality or pretend you did not hurt me deeply, then perhaps we should not have a relationship right now." My father's face flushed with anger. "You would choose these people you barely know over your own parents, after everything we have done for you." "I am not choosing anyone over anyone else," I replied. "I am choosing to live in truth. I am choosing to surround myself with people who respect my autonomy and support my happiness. If you want to be among those people, you will need to acknowledge what you did, take responsibility for it, and commit to treating me differently going forward." "This is ridiculous," my mother snapped, gathering her purse. "I see this conversation is pointless. Come on, Richard." She clearly has been completely influenced by her new wealthy friends. As they stood to leave, I remained seated, no longer feeling compelled to follow their cues or respond to their provocations. "The door remains open," I said quietly. "When you are ready to have an honest conversation, I will be here." My father paused, looking down at me with an expression I could not quite read. For a moment, I thought he might say something might break the pattern we had been locked in for so many years. Then his face hardened, and he followed my mother out of the restaurant without another word. Jason and I sat in silence for several minutes after they left. Finally, he took my hand. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. To my surprise, I realized I was. Despite the emotional intensity of the confrontation, I felt lighter, clearer, more certain of myself than I had in years. "I am," I said, a small smile forming despite the circumstances. "For the first time, I truly am." Walking out of that restaurant, I felt as though I had finally put down a heavy burden I had been carrying my entire life. The impossible task of earning my parents' unconditional love and approval. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms with the support of people who valued me for exactly who I was. 6 months after our wedding day, Jason and I moved into our first home together. We chose a charming craftsman-style house with a garden and a sunlit room perfect for my growing interest in jewelry design. It was located in a quiet neighborhood, intentionally situated halfway between his parents' home and my parents' house, symbolizing our desire to create our own space while remaining connected to family on our own terms. "What do you think of this space for your studio?" Jason asked as we unpacked boxes in the room with the best natural light. "It is perfect," I replied already, envisioning the workbench and supplies I would need. I still cannot believe Eleanor offered me an apprenticeship with the design team. In the months following our wedding, I had begun spending time at Golden Legacy's design headquarters, initially just observing and learning. To my surprise, I discovered a natural affinity for jewelry design, my background in graphic design, translating well to the three-dimensional world of gems and precious metals. "She recognized your talent immediately," Jason said, unsurprised. "That first sketch you showed her of the interlinked rings concept, she called it inspired." What had begun as a casual interest was evolving into a potential career path I had never imagined for myself. Eleanor had formally offered me an apprenticeship with their design team, with the possibility of developing my own collection in the future. Unlike my parents' guidance, which had always pushed me towards safe conventional choices, the Turners encouraged creative risk-taking and authentic self-expression. "I submitted those pendant sketches yesterday," I told Jason as we continued unpacking, "the ones inspired by the broken pieces of my original wedding dress." "The Phoenix collection," he nodded, smiling, "rising from the ashes." It seemed fitting that the most painful experience of my life was being transformed into something beautiful. The pendant designs featured fractured patterns that reassembled into stronger, more intricate forms, symbolizing how broken pieces could create something even more beautiful than the original. Our relationship with Jason's parents remained warm and supportive, but we were careful to establish healthy boundaries. They respected our independence while remaining available when needed, a balance I had never experienced with my own parents. "Your father called yesterday," Jason mentioned, carefully watching for my reaction. "He asked if we would be open to dinner next week." My relationship with my parents had evolved into something complex and still fragile. After 2 months of complete silence following our confrontation, my father had reached out first, asking to meet for coffee. Our conversation had been awkward, but represented a tiny step towards something new. My mother had joined our third meeting, still reserved but noticeably less controlling than before. With my therapist's guidance, I had established clear parameters for our interactions. We met in public places, kept visits relatively short, and I ended conversations immediately if they became manipulative or disrespectful. It was not the warm, loving parent-child relationship I had always yearned for, but it was honest in a way our previous dynamic had never been. "Did you agree to anything I asked?" Not upset, but cautious. "I said I would talk to you and let them know," he replied. "No pressure either way." I considered the invitation, checking in with myself about how it made me feel. This new habit of honoring my own emotional responses rather than suppressing them to please others was still unfamiliar but increasingly natural. "I think we could do dinner," I decided, "but at a restaurant, not their house. And we will drive separately so we can leave if necessary." "Sounds like a plan," Jason agreed, supportive as always of my boundaries. The most significant change in our relationship with my parents came during the holidays when we attempted a dinner with both sets of parents. My therapist had helped me prepare for this potentially stressful event, and I had been clear with everyone about my expectations for respectful interaction. To my surprise, the evening had gone reasonably well. My parents were on their best behavior, clearly intimidated by the Turners despite themselves. George and Eleanor were unfailingly polite, but maintained a certain protective distance that I appreciated. It was not warm or particularly enjoyable, but it was civilized, which felt like progress. "Your mother actually asked about your apprenticeship," Jason remarked as we discussed the possibility of another family dinner. "That seems like a good sign." "She did," I acknowledged, though she also mentioned twice that her friend's daughter just made partner at her law firm. Some patterns were deeply ingrained and would take time to change if they ever did. But I was learning that I could love my parents without needing their approval or understanding. I could maintain a relationship with them that honored my truth while accepting their limitations. My healing journey was multifaceted. Therapy helped me process the wedding day trauma and the lifetime of controlling behavior that preceded it. Creating jewelry allowed me to transform pain into beauty. Building a home with Jason gave me a safe space to discover who I truly was, apart from my parents' expectations. Most importantly, I was learning to trust myself, my judgments, my choices, my worth. The voice in my head that had always sounded like my mother's critical tone was gradually being replaced by my own voice, kinder and wiser. "I got a call from Sophia today," I told Jason, as we finally finished unpacking and collapsed onto our new couch. "She wants to collaborate on a bridal jewelry collection to complement her dresses." Eleanor is thrilled about the potential partnership. "That is amazing," Jason said, pulling me close. "Are you going to do it?" A year ago, I would have doubted my abilities, questioned whether I deserved such an opportunity, worried about failing. Now, while still feeling the natural nervousness that comes with any new challenge, I also felt a quiet confidence. "Yes," I said simply, "I am going to do it." Looking back on the painful journey that brought me here, I realized that sometimes the worst betrayals can lead to the greatest blessings. Had my parents not taken such a drastic action on my wedding day, I might have continued in the same dysfunctional patterns with them, indefinitely never fully claiming my independence or discovering my own strength. Their attempt to control me through cruelty ultimately freed me from their control entirely. In trying to break my spirit, they instead broke the chains that had always held me back. The burned wedding dress became a symbol, not of their power over me, but of my liberation from that power. I have learned to recognize the signs of manipulation and control in all relationships, to value authenticity over appearances, to choose connection based on mutual respect rather than obligation or habit. Most of all, I have learned that family is not defined by blood, but by love, support, and acceptance of one another's true selves. So, if you are struggling with toxic family relationships, ask yourself, are you living your life to please others at the expense of your own happiness? What might be possible if you stood firmly in your truth, even when those closest to you cannot accept it? Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the greatest freedom, and sometimes finding your true family means having the courage to set boundaries with the family you were born into. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you in any way, please subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and healing. Leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences with family expectations, and remember that your worth is not determined by anyone else's ability to see it. Like this video if you believe in the power of choosing yourself, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today.